Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is Jimmy Carr. I'm a Marketing Programs Manager here at Sencha, and we're excited today to present what's new in Sencha Ext JS 6.5 and Command 6.5. And I'm also pleased to introduce today's presenters, Sandeep Advankar. Sandeep is a Product Manager here at Sencha, and John Jarbo, who is our Technical Marketing Manager. Before I hand the mic over to Sandeep and John, I'd like to remind everyone that the webinar is being recorded and it will be available to view on demand on sencha.com as well as on the BrightTalk platform. Additionally, we will have a live Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if at any time during the webinar you have a question, feel free to submit it via the BrightTalk interface. And last but not least, I've added a polling question, which you can find at the bottom of the screen under the tab labeled Vote. I'll leave it up for a few minutes for those of you that would like to participate. So John, you can take it from here, and I will be back for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Simi. Hi, everyone. Today, as Simi mentioned, we're going to be talking about what's new in Ext JS 6.5 and Sencha Command 6.5. And just to kind of, I guess, give a really high-level overview before I get into the details. What we really focused on when we were creating 6.5 is trying to kind of increase the similarities between the classic toolkit and the modern toolkit. As well, existing users probably know that the modern toolkit kind of evolved out of Sencha Touch and has traditionally been considered sort of a mobile solution for Ext JS applications. And while that is somewhat true, it's also true that we call it modern toolkit because it's actually geared toward modern browsers. Mobile browsers tend to be modern browsers, but there are also a lot of modern browsers on the desktop side. And I think that one of the reasons it got that reputation as a mobile platform is just that the modern toolkit was somewhat different from what was available in the classic toolkit. You didn't have all the same capabilities, so it could be very difficult to create the exact same app that you had on the desktop using the modern toolkit. And in 6.5, what we were really trying to do was reduce that gap between the two toolkits. And so what we're announcing in Ext JS 6.5 really focuses on a lot of new and improved components, specifically for the modern toolkit, but some improvements on the classic side as well. And really trying to get the rich data visualization and data analytics that we had available on the classic toolkit and make that available through the modern toolkit. And kind of along the way, some of the paradigms that were used within the classic toolkit have been changed to be more amenable to the modern toolkit and modern browsers. And specifically, we created what we call a virtual store, which is a new type of store that works well with the modern components within the modern toolkit. And that really helps to improve performance over massive data sets while using the components in the modern toolkit. And then we also offered or added dynamic package loading to really improve the load times and make it more flexible how packages are actually brought into the application and when. And then on the command side, we improved the transpilation support in Sencha Command and have support for ECMAScript 2016 or ECMAScript 6, depending on what you call it. It's the same thing. And we also added better support for progressive web apps using service workers for the cache loading and that kind of thing. So let me just move to the next slide here. First off, I'm just going to kind of start with the modern grid. We added a lot of new capabilities to the grid within the modern toolkit. Trying to get a lot of the same types of capabilities that we had on the classic toolkit, as I mentioned. We have ways for the developers to control a broad range of aspects to the selection of cells, rows, and columns now within the modern grid. And we also have a couple of plugins that allow you to easily edit cells, either within individual cells if you want to edit them one at a time, or through a form-based row editing where you can edit a whole row at a time in a form that pops up on the screen. And the reason that we offer multiple plugins in that area is just to make sure that the experience that you're creating for your users is an appropriate experience on the device that they're working on. For example, editing individual cells is often difficult on a mobile phone browser just because the screen can be so small. And so form-based editing might be a better option on mobile platforms because you can make that form bigger and make it easier to navigate through the fields that need to be edited. On the tree side of things, we've also added, well, the trees, and specifically the tree grid, are actually derived from the grid classes. And so those same plugins that allow inline editing within grids also work within the tree grid, for example. And so we have the inline editing. We've improved support for keyboard navigation, so tabbing and scrolling, things like that work better. And we've also offered or added optimized views for mobile, so that tree views display and operate well on both desktop and mobile platforms, regardless of which toolkit you're using. Additional grid enhancements are, as I mentioned earlier, we have the virtual store. It serves the same purpose as the buffered grid in the classic toolkit, meaning that it loads only the pages that are needed by the grid at the given time. So if your grid is looking at a data set that might be millions of records long, it'll only pull down the page that's actually being displayed within the browser or within the grid at any given time. And as you scroll up or down, you can have a certain number of pages above or below cached in memory. And as you get up into areas that haven't been cached yet, the virtual store will automatically pull those down from the server in the background, so that the grid doesn't really need to worry about it, and the user just gets a seamless scrolling experience over the entire data set. And of course, the big reason for that is that we want to make sure that the browser performance, that the user experience is going to be the best as possible. One of the cool things that we've added in lists is that you can now have an action tool, basically. When you're viewing in a list, if you have a list item, you can swipe to the left or the right, and you can set it up to pull in controls from the left or the right-hand side, which give the user actions that they can perform on that particular record. In an email app, for example, you might swipe to archive the email, but you can set up multiple options that they can take to do different things. You can give them different colors, as you can see in the screenshot in the middle there. And one of the cool things is that since list and grids share the same capabilities, you can actually create these same types of toolkits in lists and grids and trees and other types of things. And then, of course, in the grid itself, in addition to being able to swipe in various actions like you can do in the list, there's also the ability to add what we call tools into grids. And basically, tools are just little buttons that you can add either to an individual cell or to a row, for example, that will let you perform some sort of operation on that cell or row when you click on the tool. And the tools are common to all of the rows or the various cells in a particular column. And so it can really simplify the way that you set up or the actions that you allow users to perform on the elements within a grid. For forms, for a long time, we've had sophisticated validations and things like that within forms in the classic toolkit. Now in modern, we have similar capabilities. You can do things like field masking to ensure that you're using or that you're accepting the right types of key presses in specific fields. We have extensible validations and various different ways to display errors. For example, when the user clicks the submit button, if fields don't validate properly, you have a few different ways that you can alert them to that and help draw attention to the field that needs to be fixed. And we also have different ways to kind of group fields together and create labels that help guide the user to the right area of the form, wherever it is that they want to fill in the data. And those groups actually apply to the error displays too. So you can create an error message that applies to a group rather than to individual fields, if that's going to be easier for users to understand. And then we have a number of built-in advanced validations that are available in Ext JS 6.5 as well. Things that help validate the user entered a valid IP address or phone number or a timestamp or whatever. You can always create your own validators, but we offer a number of these common ones out of the box just so that developers don't have to do it, because there are commonly little edge cases that they need to worry about. This way they don't have to worry about that. In terms of panels and tabs, within the modern toolkit, we now have the ability to add panels within the form. So you can do things like resize the headers within your panels. You can rotate the little headers. They're not always headers. They can be at the top, left, right, bottom, whatever. However you set them up, they can stick to the appropriate side of the panel. You can resize them. You can rotate them so that the text shows up, vertically rather than horizontally or whatever. And you can actually add little buttons in there to collapse those headers so that they don't take up as much real estate all the time. You can have them, start out default collapsed or default expanded to really make sure that users are able to understand how they're supposed to interact with that thing. And then you can also put tools within those headers so that you have the little buttons that I mentioned when I was talking about the grids. You can do the same thing within the panels now, so that you can give users more options for how to interact with the panel that you're putting up on the screen. Okay, I'm trying to go to the next. Did I miss a? No, okay. So we've also improved menu enhancements. So we have things like floating menus now. Instead of taking over the screen and going modal when you open up a menu, now you can actually have a menu pop up just like you would, a context menu or something on your desktop apps. You can have that pop up on the screen, and the user can move up and down to select the appropriate item. The floating menu can actually be aligned with or linked to a header like we were just talking about on the other side, so that you can have sort of a collapsible menu. Commonly you'll see something like this with the so-called hamburger menu in mobile apps, where you might have a little button in the corner of the screen, or you might have kind of a header along the left-hand side of the screen that shows a list of icons. And when you tap or hover over a particular icon, it might expand a larger menu that gives you a description for what that icon does. You can do that pretty easily with Ext JS 6.5 now, having a floating menu that pops up when you expand the appropriate header or icon on the header area. We also have menus which are derived from panels, and so you can actually put any type of interface element within the floating menu now. So if you look at the example in the upper right, you can see that there's a little picture in there. There's various fonts, and you can really have better control over what that menu or how that menu is formatted, so that it really looks as well, you have the flexibility to make it look as good as you want it to, and you can also add additional information in there to really make it easy to use and help users get the information that they need with fewer explicit actions. Another area where we've improved things is in layouts. So in the past, we've had, like a card deck or a card viewer, where you can have a next and a previous button to kind of move to the next card in the deck. If you look on the left-hand side, there's the three little circles at the center in the bottom of that view. That's a little indicator that lets you explicitly jump to a specific step or a specific card within the deck. It's not necessarily as relevant for a 3-card deck, but if you had 5 or 7 or more, then you have the option of giving users that indicator so that they can jump to a specific card rather than having to go sequentially through the entire deck to get to the end. We've also improved layout so that you can resize the areas that are within the layout. If you look in the right-hand picture, you can see that we've created sort of a 3-column layout with 3 different panels stacked or lined up next to each other. You can actually, well, if this were live, you could position the cursor over one of those vertical borders and actually drag it to the left or the right to resize the size of those columns within the individual layout. You're not actually changing the overall width, but you can change where the splitter is located to expose more information. This is for cases where you don't need to have like a full-fledged grid over the information. Of course, you could always use a grid as well if that was appropriate for what you were trying to display. We've improved the charts quite a bit. We've added a couple of new capabilities in the charts. We have a box plot, which is just another option for displaying the information. We've also added what we call a chart navigator, which I'll try to explain here, and maybe Sandeep can show it later in the demo portion. But basically what it is if you look on the right-hand side, there's a chart, and below the chart, there's a little, sort of a bird's eye view of what the chart is showing. And you can see there are dark areas, and then there's a lighter area there. You can actually move that lighter area to the left or the right to expose the details in the chart up above. So it's kind of a way to see a bigger picture view of the overall chart and then select an area to zoom into really easily. Other new components in forms. When you're looking at a form and you have what like a date field where the user needs to specify a particular date. In the past, when you've clicked on that field, it'll often open up a date picker at the bottom of the screen if you're using the Modern Toolkit. And from there, you can choose the month, the day, and the year, and specify the date that way. With Ext JS 6.5, we now have a date panel, which when you select that, instead of opening up that little thing along the bottom where you can manually specify the month, day, and year, you can actually get a little mini calendar there where you can, jump back and forth through adjacent months or years and select a specific day from the calendar. That's not always appropriate for all the different screen sizes out there. You might still want to use the old style date picker on like a mobile phone, just because the screen is so small you may not be able to make out, or you may not be able to select individual days on the calendar. So you have the option of choosing which picker you want to show up when you expand that field. But we do have the new date picker, or the new date panel, available now, which gives a more intuitive way for users to select dates on systems that actually support that capability. And then we've also added what we call dialogues, which are basically a panel that's modal and it's centered, and it basically makes sure that when a user gets to an area where a dialogue is appeared, then they need to excuse me, they need to focus their attention on the dialogue to answer some important question before they can move on through the application. And so we now have that capability not only on desktop, but also on mobile platforms through the Modern Toolkit. And of course, since it's a panel, the developers have full control over what's displayed in there, and it's configurable whether it's modal or not, and all that type of thing. But it does give you an additional option for displaying an area that needs additional input that does not obscure the rest of the screen, like the older the older versions required. So we've improved the D3 adapter, which, if you're not familiar with it, the D3 adapter basically just makes it easier to use D3 visualizations within Ext JS applications by helping the D3, well, it doesn't really help the visualizations. We offer kind of prepackaged visualizations that know how to use things like the Ext JS data package to communicate with the backend and to use the Ext JS stores and understand the events that are being passed there. So when the store gets new information, it can automatically push that out to the visualization without requiring developers to do much. So the components that we offer through our D3 adapter have been upgraded to understand the version 4 API of D3, which is, well, it's a big boon for developers just because the version 4 of D3 has modular packages now instead of being a monolithic one. So they can actually choose which ones to include, which ones not to include, and they have better control over the footprint of the application within the browser. We've also added a new built-in visualization for an organization chart, which, as you can see, is sort of a tree visualization, which shows basically an icon for each node in the tree. And that's easy to set up within the Ext JS app. So if you already have something like a tree store, which represents hierarchical data within the Ext JS application, then it's easy to tie that to both something like a grid or a pivot grid, as well as to a visualization of some sort, like an org chart or perhaps a tree map or something from D3, and have that all work seamlessly and make it really easy for developers to add that capability. We've also improved the pivot grids. Well, just having pivot grids in the modern toolkit is an improvement, but then also we've added the ability to have widget columns within the pivot grid. So instead of just showing textual data, you can also include something like maybe a spark line to show kind of the trend of what the data looks like within a collapsed row. You can also collapse rows and columns now within the pivot grid, both from an individual row and column perspective, as well as you can add, like a button that collapses everything or that expands everything. Excuse me. And also the exporter, which, well, users know that we've had an exporter for the grid and the pivot grid for a while, which allows you to export the data that's displayed within the grid. It can be, you can choose a variety of different output formats, whether you want to export a CSV or as an Excel file or whatever. And the developer has the option to export all the data within the data store or just the stuff that's being displayed on the screen that the user has been working with. And this makes it easy for users of your application to share information with colleagues that may not be using the same application. Maybe they have a different job function or whatever. For whatever reason, if they like to use Excel, now with Ext JS 6.5, in addition to being able to get the data from the exported or the data exported from the application, they can also get, if they're exporting a pivot grid to an Excel file, in addition to getting just the data, they can also get the definition of the pivot grid so that when they open it up in Excel, they'll actually see an Excel pivot table that gives them the same capabilities within Excel as the Ext JS application was offering to its users. So that's just another way to make it easier for your users to share information with colleagues that may not be using the same application. And sort of, this isn't really associated with a specific control or component or anything, but kind of across the board, we've improved accessibility and theming for the different components. We've improved focus management so that developers have better control over which components are active when, say, a form first opens up. So users kind of know where to start when they open up a new screen. We also have improved keyboard navigation, so a number of the various controls like the grids and the pivot grids, trees, that kind of thing. You can actually navigate through whatever fields are on screen using the keyboard now, which can be a great help for not only to improve accessibility of the application, but also for people who are doing things like common data entry workflows. It can greatly simplify things for them because they don't need to jump back and forth between the keyboard and the mouse. And as I mentioned, that's available with forms and grids now. And it doesn't just work with, like on a form, jumping between different fields. You can also use it for things like a grid where you may want to go, column by column before you go to the next row, or maybe row by row and then go to the next column. You can control how the user is going to navigate through that grid. And then we've also expanded our theming API so that developers have better control and better access to the individual pieces on the screen so that they can control what they look like and really have fine-grained control over the user interface and the user experience that the app is presenting. And one of the things that I personally am excited about is that with all these new capabilities, we've also added some new real-life example projects that are available for you to download to actually see how these components can be used within a real application. Probably the most, well, the broadest example, I guess you could say, is a little app that we call Coworky. It's basically an employee directory, and it gives you a variety of different ways to see a list of all the employees of a fictional company. And it includes things like maps to the office where they're based, and you can see a little headshot of the individual users. You can see what the org chart looks like. You can search, filter all the various things that you would want to do through a grid. It gives an example of like a login screen and various other capabilities, and that's available through GitHub, I believe, and it should be accessible through the examples page, which if you look on your screen right now at the bottom, there should be a series of tabs, and one of them points to the examples. If you follow that link, then it'll take you to our examples page, which includes not just this example application, but also documentation and our kitchen sink example, which provides kind of an isolated example of what individual components look like when you're using them, which can really be a head start for new developers to kind of understand, what the code should look like to instantiate kind of a minimal grid, for example. So you can access that there, and it's also, that just takes you to our website. So if you start at our website, you'll also be able to find it. Just go to the product pages, and there's an example areas there that'll take you to the same place. And that kind of wraps up what I had for Ext JS 6.5. I just have one more slide that I'm going to talk about Sencha Command 6.5. And just because, these changes aren't really visible to users so much, but kind of the three biggest features that we've added in Command 6.5 is dynamic package loading. I mentioned that earlier, which really helps developers kind of control and streamline the process of loading an app into the browser or onto a device, where the developer can control how packages are being loaded and when they're being loaded, so that the unnecessary packages don't get loaded in the first place. We've also improved support for progressive web applications, made it easier for you to configure, kind of what the service worker-based caching looks like and how it operates, so that when you have an app that's loaded onto a mobile device to work in offline mode, it's a lot easier to set that up. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, we've also offered or improved support, adding some support for ECMAScript 2015 or ECMAScript 6, ES6, so that you can actually use the newer style JavaScript syntax for ES6 within an Ext JS application, and Sencha command will automatically transpile that as appropriate into something that will be compatible across the a broad range of browsers, typically converting it into ES5, which will be able to run in the broadest range of browsers. And just to summarize, we already had this slide earlier, but really what we've added is new components that kind of create parity between the classic and modern toolkits. And we've improved a number of different components as well, and created a few new ones, especially where the component that was available in the classic toolkit may not be appropriate for use on mobile devices. Maybe it's not flexible, or the UI just requires too much screen real estate. We've created new components to kind of mimic that same capability, but still be mobile friendly and adaptable to both mobile and desktop environments. We've improved rich data visualization and data analytics on the modern toolkit side, so you can now do similar things in both types of platforms. We added the virtual store, so modern toolkit applications now have that same buffering capability behind the scenes that can greatly improve performance when you're working with extremely large data sets. Added the support for ECMAScript 2016 or ES6, and improved support for progressive web apps in Sencha Command, so that it's easier than ever for developers to create apps that work not only in online but in offline mode as well. And with that, I will hand things over to Sandeep for kind of a quick demo of what some of these new components look like. Let me just switch over to his screen share, and hopefully you'll be able to. Okay, so there we go. Take it away, Sandeep.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, exciting presentation. I was looking at the poll results as we were doing that, and I saw more than 10% of you have already moved to Ext JS 6.5. So as a product manager, this is really a satisfying part of any product development, seeing 10% of customers already moving to 6.5. In this part of the presentation, I will go over some of the demos that we are releasing with 6.5. In particularly, you should notice this particular GitHub page. It's a github.com/sencha-xjs-examples. And we released a few examples on this, and we'll be adding few more over next few releases. The one in particular I'll be going over in this part of the presentation is the Coworky app that John mentioned, and the multi-package demo. But you should also look at the Quick Start, Modern Tutorial, which are very basic type of applications for those who are getting started with Ext JS, and PWA app, which is something that if you want to implement PWA type construct, how to do that. So these are all great applications, example applications. And each of these applications, if you go, for example, some of these applications are full stack. What that means is we are providing you client as well as server. So you need to install the latest node, latest command in Ext JS 6.5, and do the npm install, and just have to build the client side and do the npm start. So let me do the npm start here on my computer, and it will start the application at localhost 3000. So let me go and refresh this. So this is how the Coworky application looks like. And I want to make sure that I go through the three important concepts when building this application. So this is a cross-platform application, means you can use it on desktop, mobile, tablets. And the three things that we are doing in this application is, one is we are using the profiles, second is we are using the platform config, and third thing is we are using responsive config. So those are the things I want to kind of go over here. So the application profile is a way to profile your devices and offer tailored behavior to the users to this category of devices. So you can create different profiles for desktop, tablet, phone, and then create different views, controller, model, and store logic. So in the Coworkey app, we have two different profiles in this application. There's one for, we calling it tablet, is also for desktop, and one for the phone. And the framework evaluates each of these profiles and considers the first profile and looks at each active method and how it returns. So and in the code, if you look at the code part of it, let's see. So in the code for the client application, the profile, you see this phone profile, and the phone profile has is active method, which will return if it's on the phone, true if it's on the phone. And it uses a specific set of views that will be applied when it's on the phone, and versus when it's on a tablet, the different set of views. So let's see how it works in operation. So I have this Coworkey application where I see this menu. It's the user profile information occupies the entire screen, and then I have a bunch of grids here for showing the employees, for showing the organizations, for showing all the offices, as well as the activity. This covers the entire screen, is great looking on the desktop as well as the tablet. Now let me move to the mobile part of it for this application. So now you can see that the activity view, which was a grid earlier on the tablet, on the desktop, is now a list view. And it looks much better on the phone because of the form factor it has. It shows the important information that you need. The offices is a list as well, the organization, the employees. It's showing the important information that you need. For example, the profile picture, name, the title, as well as the number to call. So and the home. So that's the profile is one of the important concepts, and with that you can basically develop mobile specific views or desktop specific views and use some of the new improvements that we have been outlining in the Modern Toolkit. This entire application is developed using Modern Toolkit. The second part of it is the platform config. Now the platform config is available on every class, and this is a great way to control the instantiation and control of your class as well as components. And the platform config lets you configure a class based on the detected platform. So in the Coworkey app, you want to show the header with the save button. So I'm on the profile page. I'm editing this information. I have this save button and cancel button on the top, and there's a wizard to navigate between different parts of this form. Now in the phone mode, I want to have it differently, and that's what the platform config does. So if you go in and look at the wizard, the code for the wizard, there's a platform config, and in the platform config there is a phone, and the phone has a header which has a save button, and the toolbar is on the bottom, versus what we are seeing right now where we have a submit and cancel button. And that's what the platform config does. Allows you to control your classes and components. So let's go and look at how it looks on the mobile. So as you can see, the save cancel is gone here. The save is replaced by this the icon here. The toolbar is moved on the bottom for this, where you can still navigate. And so this platform config helps you to take the same class and show it a different way on the desktop as well as mobile. The third part is the responsive config part. And now that's been around since 6.0. And on specific platform, if there is a need to change the UI based on certain dynamic conditions, and there are dynamic conditions that's always happening. You want to switch from portrait to landscape mode, or you want to change the size of your browser. Responsive config is very useful to create that unique user experience. So in this coworking application, you can see that this profile is a profile. There's an image and there's a name and a title, and this is an edge box, right? And let's look at the responsive config part of it. So the responsive config here says that if the width is less than 600, then I want to make it vertical. Okay, if it's not, then it's normal edge box. So here right now it's not vertical, but as I keep on moving my screen, and as it goes less than 600, you can see that the profile it is now in the vertical mode. So you can see the image on the top, the name and title moving to the below the image. If I move above 600, it goes back. So that's the responsive config. So with the tools that we're giving as part of Ext JS 6.5, along with the new components and configurations that you're adding, you have basically capability to create a cross-platform application targeting multiple devices. Now let's look at some of the new components that we added in 6.5. So let me go and edit this. So let's say if I go into the personal, and you can see this birthday, and we have a date panel here. Now when I click on it, this shows you a new date panel. It's a very nice looking new component. And as you know, there's a glaring difference between mobile and desktop user experience. So on mobile, you expect interface when editing such a field as a modal attached to the bottom of the screen. Versus on the desktop, this experience looks great. And that's what the date field does, along with the date picker, using either as a date panel or as a date picker. So now instead of the desktop view, if I go into the mobile view, let me refresh it. And now if I go and click on here, as you can see here, it's a date picker. So that's a great experience on the mobile side, where it's easy to pick the date and change it. And it's as per the platform your needs are. Now the list has undergone a lot of change. So let me go back and look at the list. Let's see the employees. So there's a lot of internal improvement in this release, and then there's a brand new plugin that John mentioned earlier. It's called a list swiper plugin, and that allows you to add actions to the list items. So in this case, we have designed the list so that there is the profile picture, name, the title, and the most relevant action, which is to call the particular employee, is listed right here. But then there are multiple actions that you can do. So the action that you can do is you can Skype, and you can go and Skype it, or if you move it a little bit higher, you can actually go and email it. And this particular mode is called stepper mode, where you're stepping between the actions of either Skype or email. There's another mode where you can see all the actions together as well. Now these are the most commonly used actions, but if you move on the left side, there's another action of edit, which you can as well do, which is not as frequent, so it's moved to the scrolling, moving on to the left side. So this list swiper plugin is an exciting plugin, and you can use those in your applications. And as you know, the grid is inheriting from the list. So the list swiper is actually applies to the grid rows as well. So you can use that in grid as well. Now, one of the nice part of this application is also showing the location in the maps. So it's very nice how the marker is represented in the maps view. It looks very nice on the desktop as well as on the phone side. And so for that, there's a new part in the map component. So in the UX package for Google Maps, we are now supporting a markers config that makes it easy to manage a store of markers through the Google Map markers record. And that helps you manipulate the store and its record, and so that it has a proper, appropriate effect on the map. So those are some of the key parts of the coworking application. co-working application is very thoughtfully designed and run, and there are a lot of things that you should go and look at the application in detail. All right, so let me move on to the second application that we have released, which is called the multi-package demo. So the multi-package demo, Sencha command has supported the concept of packages for several years, and large-scale applications often leverage packages to encapsulate classes, styling, and resources. Sencha command builds all these pieces into your application, and you can use these packages in a whole new way now. You can use this basically dynamically. So let's go. So I downloaded this application as well. So let me go and look at. This is the multi-package demo of the application I have here. And if I look at in the app.json, typically you put packages in the requires array, and that's where you put the packages, right? To switch to dynamic loading, what you need to do is simply move some or all of these packages, your packages, in a new array. It's called uses array. So when you have that, you are basically making those packages dynamically loaded. You need to add a package loader as part of your requires as well. So after these changes, basically when the Sencha command builds your application, it will generate specific bundles for the application and each of these used packages. When your application loads, it will contain only its code and the code from the required packages, but not the used packages. So the JavaScript, CSS, and resources of these used packages will be in the applications build folder, just like any images and other assets. So let me stop this application and let me start the multi-package application. All right, so let me go back and load the application here. So I have the application loaded here, and let's go and look at this. So in this case, there's a package for dashboard, there's a package for users, and there's a package for settings. And if I go and click on this, so I'm seeing the home screen. When I go and click on it, I see the users data and files getting downloaded, as you can see here. Now, when I click on the dashboard, you can see the dashboard JavaScript, CSS, corresponding files package getting downloaded. And when I click on settings, the settings is downloaded. And the part which is important for you to know is in the main you can basically use the ext.package.load method. It makes it trivial to load packages when you're ready for them. The package loader handles the packages JavaScript and CSS assets, as well as recursively loading any packages that it may require. So if you're using Ext JS routes, as shown in this example, you might do something like this, where you are loading the package, and then you can look at the load package and you can see how it's loading the package. So using dynamic package loading can be a real-time saver for your users. So no longer they will have to wait for every byte of your applications to load, when in reality they only needed about 20% of it. It can also save time for developers, because Sencha command is no longer have to load all their code to make a dev build or watch all the code at the same time. So that's a fantastic new addition through Sencha command, and we are really excited about it. Okay, and the last example, I don't have enough time to go through it, is the PWA app. This is progressive web application, and it's also provided as a full stack application. There's a client and there's a node-based server, and similar to what I did for co-working app, you just have to build the client and do the npm install, npm start to start the node server. And it will look something like this, similar to co-working application, but it will basically I haven't loaded it yet. So it's basically going to best part is to go and load it on the actual phone and see the service worker and see it functioning. The last thing I want to show is how you can actually look at different components in action, and that's possible by going through the kitchen sink. So if you go to examples.sencha.com and if you look at the kitchen sink modern, this has really changed a lot, and we have made a significant number of changes because the massive update to the Ext JS modern toolkit. So the things that John mentioned earlier, so the grid, right? So grid, we have flexible selection. So with the flexible selection, you can select rows, columns. You have ability to drag and drop. So here I'm dragging similar to your similar type of your Excel type of functionality. You can create now through the flexible selection mode of the grid. We are providing the big data example, and all these example codes is right here, so you can take a look at it. It has the ability to provide a row body where you can specify any pieces of data, including rows of another table or even charts right here. You can do export, where you can export it to Excel and multiple other formats through the exporter plugin that was mentioned earlier. The other part which we mentioned was the menu part. The menus are significantly enhanced so that you can use the menus across different places, even in the rows. You can have grid tools that helps you do the actions on any cell, rows, or even grid header. So the grid tools are there's a lot of improvements with regard to grid tools. Let's go and look at the tree as well. Before that, the cell editing is what we mentioned earlier. You can do cell editing right here, or if you go and look at the mobile part of it, you can do the cell editing will come up as a modal dialog. So if you actually go and go into the mobile side of the kitchen sink, I think we have an example for that, editable grid, and if I click on it, this shows you a dialog that comes from the right side. So that's a better experience for mobile versus the experience that you can provide for the desktop, where you can do the grid directly in the row itself. Then I think the key concept that I want to make sure that we all understand is the editable grid, where you can edit because the tree inherits from the grid, so it has all the benefits that the grid brings to you. So the tree is really highly functional. The pivot grid has a new layout mode. So there is a tabular layout which looks very similar to the Excel table mode. As John mentioned, as you export the pivot table, it actually gives you the real pivot table and also the raw data as two different sheets. So that's something which is applicable. Some of these are applicable to both modern and classic. So both toolkit developers can use those kind of functionality. The things that is common again to both is some of the things that we added in D3 and others is the org chart, for example. So org chart allows you to show the hierarchical data in a really nice form using the D3 org chart. Let's go through the charts, and I think we need to cover the navigator part of it. That's a new component, and if you have a large stream of data, you can have the navigator component move through it and see the parts of it. So you can pan the particular chart, or you can zoom it as well. So those are all exciting parts of it. I think we just scratched the surface of what is possible to Ext JS 6.5. I think since we have only 5 minutes left, Simi, I'd like to open it for questions.
Yeah, thank you for the demo, Sandeep, and John for the presentation. We do have a bunch of questions. And we only have about 5 minutes left. So if we don't get to your question, we will be sure to reach out to you either personally or maybe we can do some type of follow-up blog post. So first question here that came in was somebody said that we've been using 6.2.1 Classic and also using the Sencha Services Dynamic Packages code. So is this a breaking change if we go over to 6.5, and what should we be aware of before making the upgrade?
Well, I think I will let Sandeep answer that. I'm not familiar with the packages that are offered through services.
Yeah, that's a good question, and probably I will directly follow up with you and see the packages that our services team offer and how we can help you migrate to the dynamic package loading with 6.5. So I'll follow up after this call.
Okay, and then somebody's asking, does 6.5 now offer a date and time widget component?
Yeah, so the date panel is something, yeah, definitely you can make use of it. You can go in the panels and look at how it looks. It's part of multiple applications, like co-working applications. So there's a basic date panel that we used in the co-working application, as well as there's advanced date panel that John showed in the slides as well. These are some exciting announcements.
Okay, somebody's also asking, when are you going to release this version for premium customers and support on the Sencha website? It's currently available, right, Sandeep?
Yeah, so 6.5 is available for the customers. You can just go to the support.sencha.com and download the Ext JS 6.5, command 6.5. For anyone who's not a customer, they can go and do Ext JS trials and get access to it.
Yeah, and then I've included a list to our blog posts and attachments and links, and if you just go in there, there's a direct link to go download it from the support panel. Next question here, will Classic get any of these enhancements that Modern has received, such as actions on lists and grid cells, resizable layouts, etc.?
Yeah, so I think Classic has... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Sandeep. Go ahead, Sandeep.
Yeah, so I believe many of the things that we brought in Modern are already present in Classic, and they may be called a little differently, but they are already there in Classic. We plan to kind of publish more detail or easy to use kind of comparison between Modern and Classic. So that will come, but most of the things that you see in the Modern should already be there in Classic. The new features that we added, some of these like D3 adapter, pivot grid, exporter, the new charts, they are applicable to both Modern and Classic.
Okay, next question here. When will there be updates for the different IDEs? Sandeep, I think you can take this one, for Visual Studio, WebStorm. Yeah, so the way the plugins are created so that it looks at your applications and looks at the Ext JS framework that it's using and uses that for providing code completion and other useful things. So they should all work. We know there is an issue with the Visual Studio at this point, and we'll be releasing a new plugin for Visual Studio in next week or 2 weeks time frame. Okay, somebody has a question. Why does the date picker panel on the coworking birthday page pop up on the side versus it displaying directly underneath the form fields? Is the date picker panel adjustable?
So I think that was more a matter of, I think that was more a matter of typical conventions within mobile apps. When you open a date field, typically the input panels pop up from the bottom of the screen or the side. rather than being anchored to the specific field that you're working in. Is that right, Sandeep?
Yeah, I think you can configure that. You're right. In the Cowork app, it does pop up to the lab, but yeah, you can look at the Ext JS kitchen sink example and look at the configuration as well.
Okay, somebody's asking, do we have a component for showing the time picker?
Sandeep, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I don't know whether we have explicit component for picking time. There is a date panel component, something we can address in the next releases. Yeah.
Okay, we're just about over the time over here, but last question, are there any configurations available in Ext JS for workflow related applications?
I'm not sure that I understand that question. Sandeep, do you?
Yeah, no, I think I will follow up with the one who asked this question and can get some input and answer it individually.
Yeah, it looks like they're probably trying to build workflow related application and need to maybe see examples. Yeah, so we are over our 60-minute time slot here. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Sandeep and John. If we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you directly, and I'm sure we can probably even come up with a blog post that addresses a lot of these questions here. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us next time.